Good evening. Please stand as you are able and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone, to the School Town of Speedway Board of Trustees meeting for June 10th, 2025. We're working from a 14-item agenda, and the first agenda item is to approve minutes for the executive meeting held on April 4th, 2025. Yes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from our executive meeting, April 8th, 2025.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving those minutes, please signify. That passes 5-0.
Minutes are signed.
Thank you very much. The second agenda item this evening is to approve the minutes of our regular meeting held May 13th, 2025.
I move that we approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2025 meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor of approval, please signify. That's 5-0 as well.
It's a better way from now on.
Minutes are signed.
Thank you very much. Our third agenda item this evening is a report from Policy Analytics given by Mr. Barry Gardner.
Well, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Give a sec here, pull up. Wait, so.
Bill, do you want me to jump on? just two ways. You can do like a commercial promo or something while we're waiting, because I'm sure our audio's live.
I could flip.
Well, I'm hooked up to a few. Hey,
There we go.
There we go.
You're driving?
yeah, I'm driving.
Okay, I'll try to keep up.
Okay, we're on slide 2.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. Really talk tonight a little bit about some of the impact we're seeing from Senate Enrolled Act 1, right? This past legislative session, there was a major campaign around property taxes, especially homeowner relief when it came to property taxes. And the legislative body passed its probably most sweeping legislative piece of work on property taxes that we've seen in quite some time. And a lot of moving parts and a lot of complications to that. And tonight, we're just going to walk through really at a high level of what some of those changes look like and what they mean really for the school district, schools in general, really of what we're seeing across the state. And at Policy Analytics, we've been really focusing on these 3 main areas of what is the impact on tax rates. Spoiler alert, this is going to drive up tax rates. And what does that mean for a school district? What does it mean for your levies, or what we really refer to as your revenue? So the dollars that come in specifically really in your operations fund and in your referendum fund, because those are property tax driven funds. This isn't state tuition support, this is property tax driven. So what's happening there? And then finally, what's the impact on the taxpayer? Right? When they look at a taxpayer liability or what they're paying, is the legislation doing what it intended in terms of maybe providing some relief for homeowners? And take a look a little bit at that. So have all these moving parts, and as we start to look at some of the data, thank you, we really start maybe with just a little bit of education slides of how we get to our revenue. Okay, and it's as simplest form, it's a math problem. It's the net assessed value times the tax rate gets me my revenue.
When you say how we get to our revenue, you're talking about we, the school.
The school district, and really government units.
Okay.
So town as well in those pieces.
But not the individual at this point. Taxpayer,
Not the
down here's number
taxpayer.
3, so this is all,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. And so this is our math problem, and that net assessed value is the value of all the properties after any deductions they receive. So again, you think your own tax bill, right? We have those deductions that we receive that will get us to our net assessed value. And there's an interaction between that value and rates. And we've been living in an environment where assessed value has been going up. Right? Think of home prices. Home prices have gone up. So as home prices go up, so does their assessed value, which in turn drives up net assessed value, which means we often receive additional revenue at the same tax rate. Or our tax rate could go down and generate the same amount of revenue. Senate Enrolled Act 1 completely changes that for us, because it's going to create a declining net assessed value, which really is this last line where we're going to see net assessed value go down. And as it does, the mechanics of this will force the tax rates up in order to generate the same amount of revenue. So even you may not be getting any additional revenue, rates are going to go up. They become somewhat arbitrary, really, in a sense, when we start to think about it, because they don't have a real connection to the revenue in the way they did before. So this is really kind of new within these pieces. And it's driven really by a few different pieces that taxpayer or the legislative body put into place. One is they've started this process to give homeowners additional deductions on their home. We've always had what we've known as a standard deduction of $48,000 and a supplemental deduction of 35%. So if you ever looked at your tax bill, it's how they lower it from that gross assessed value down to what they actually tax you on. They're shifting away from the $48,000 standard and giving now everyone a 2/3 deduction, because that $48,000 deduction becomes worth less and less each year as your home value increases. So this creates a bigger deduction for homeowners. Okay? And anytime we increase deductions, the broad stroke here is we're going to push down net assessed value. And when we push down net assessed value, we're going to drive up tax rates and we're going to impact your revenue. That's really the broad theme of all this, right, is when we increase deductions, those are really the major impacts. And they've done that first with homeowners in this fashion. The second way they've impacted the school district in terms of revenues is they didn't feel the deductions went far enough. So they also proposed an additional credit for homeowners on their tax bill of 10% of your tax liability up to $300. And it's what we often say is after the property tax caps, which majority of our homes here in Speedway are at the property tax caps like we talked, I think it was last February, and we kind of went through that data, right? So if you think of a home that has a gross assessed value of $150,000, they can pay 1% of the cap, which is $1,500. They're going to get an extra $150 off their tax bill and only pay $1,350. That $150 that they're not paying is revenue that does not come to the school and to the other local taxing districts. So it's a revenue impact that's on top of some of the typical things we've seen in terms of revenue for the school district as well. So this is another piece that is impacting revenue. They also increased some deductions for over 65 veterans, some of the disability pieces, changed the income percentiles. But all in all, it just, again, creates really a revenue subtraction and for the district. They also increased deductions on the 2% class, which we often know are properties like apartments, long-term care, and agriculture, what fit into that 2% category. They typically have not had deductions before. And as you can see, like homes, all of this legislation phases in over the next 6 years to the point where we get to 2031, and in this group, they're going to have really a 1/3 deduction on their property tax bill. Okay? And again, really this broad theme, right? Again, we're increasing deductions, which is going to drive down net assessed value, it's going to push up rates and impact revenues. That's what all of this is really doing at the end of the day. And we'll talk then what's that mean on the other side in terms of impact liability-wise. This one's a really interesting one, especially for Speedway. This is business personal property, which is the equipment inside of a business, okay, and that we're able to tax on. And they did two different things to this. One, there's been a de minimis amount of up to $80,000 that a business did not have to report for taxable purposes. They changed that to $2 million. So now a business doesn't have to report anything up to $2 million. Starting then this year, they're changing what you actually are able to tax on. Okay? And currently, businesses can depreciate a piece of property down to a 30% floor. So think of a piece of equipment maybe worth $1 million. I can depreciate it down to $300,000. I'm always going to pay taxes on that $300,000. January 1 and beyond, they can actually depreciate that down to 0 for taxable purposes. It creates some incentive to move my equipment to after January 1 of 2025 and beyond, because I can potentially lower the tax liability on that business personal property. So we have these two things kind of going on. And it's really interesting in the data. We're going to show this here in a second. This next chart just really shocked me, but we're seeing this across the state. Speedway, within the school district, your business personal property in total is about $390 million in total currently. When we wipe out the $2 million, anything under $2 million in value, we eliminate $30 million of that. $360 million, so the overwhelming majority of your business personal property is over that $2 million threshold. Okay, so if we go to the next chart, the reason I wanted to set that up, this is looking at what makes up your assessed value, your net assessed value, because that's what we're going to tax on. And I want to focus first on the business personal property. As you can see on the left, right now it makes up about 32% of your AV, we often talk your wallet, right? What's going to help generate revenue. In 2031, when all of this legislation is in place, it's still 32%. Why? Back to the fact that I just gave you that $360 million is above that $2 million threshold. And we at Policy Analytics can't project our business is going to have an economic incentive to move their business personal property to either purchase new equipment, because if I purchase it now, I can depreciate it down to zero over the next 5 to 6 years and lower my tax liability. Or do I work with my attorneys and I create a new LLC and find a way to shift my business personal property to a new entity, then I can depreciate it down. In our mind, it creates some economic incentive to do that. If that happens, that piece of the pie, the yellow, starts to get smaller over the next 6 years. That's probably one of the risks that I see in terms of your assessed value. And why does that matter? As that gets smaller, that AV is basically being subtracted out, which means, again, we're going to drive down net assessed value further and have greater impact on rates and revenues, right? Now, maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe it takes 15 years for that to happen. We don't know, but it's something I think we just got to, for our perspective, we have to keep an eye on over the next several years of what happens with that. It's a real wrinkle in the legislation that's going to be interesting to see. When we look otherwise, when we look at your assessed value, this is really what's driving this piece. The green line in here represents your gross assessed value, and so that's before deductions. Okay? And you can see it's continuing positively and upwards to the right. And that's because right now everything in the economic data, from the housing market to economic activity, tells us that assessed value still right now has a positive trend to it. So we have about a 3 to 3.5% trending AV growth that it's growing by each year. So that's why it's positively kind of moving up. The blue line is the net assessed value and what it would have looked like prior to Senate Enrolled Act 1. Again, positive upward trend because of that gross AV going up. The orange line represents our projections for your net assessed value, which shows them declining over the next 6 years. And that is because, again, if we go back to those previous slides, when we introduce more and more deductions at a larger amount, we drive down net assessed value. And that's really what's happening here. In 2031, you see it maybe start to tick back up. That's because we hit the floor. All the deductions are fully in place, and we kind of move back to a growing AV. So one of the things we've been saying with districts is we may have to rethink our mindset around tax rates and some revenues because we're entering this new environment of declining AV. And then 6 years from now, we may have to shift our philosophy again because we're going to move back to what we've almost been used to the last few years. So it's a real kind of interesting time in terms of the thought process around all these pieces. So what is that declining net assessed value doing? As we look at the next slide, we start to get into some of the impact of Speedway schools specifically. So this is the school's overall tax rate, okay, combined tax rate of your funds. And the dotted lines represent what these would have looked like prior to the passage of Senate Enrolled Act 1. Okay. The solid lines are what we see happening after with the impact of Senate Enrolled Act 1. Okay. And they're really two different scenarios. They really have to do with your debt. Do we keep your debt levy or your revenue constant or your debt rate constant? At this point, that's not really what matters. What we're trying to see is what's the overall movement in the rates. And as you can see, the rates will go up 20 to 30 cents. And that's with you not doing anything differently. Now, you are not the only school district facing this. This is the same chart, it's different numbers every day that I see when I do this presentation. It looks exactly the same. On average, we're seeing school district tax rates go up anywhere to 30 to 50 cents over the next 6 years. And it's not just the school districts that are going to face this. It's going to be cities, towns, counties who are going to see their rates rise. Why are their rates rising? Back to that chart before, net assessed value is going down. Why is net assessed value going down? Because we're increasing deductions, right? So we see this in your overall rate, and then the next slide, we see it in your debt service rate. We're paying attention a little bit to the debt service for all districts, and you see a gold line go across there because the legislative body had 2 years ago, and have continued, have put in some additional requirements if your debt service rate is above a couple of thresholds. It used to be 40 and 80 cents, now it's 40 and 70 cents. If your debt service rate now is above 70 cents, if you want to do any kind of bond issue, it automatically has to go to the referendum as a ballot. You have to put it on the referendum. No other option. Okay? If you're above 40 cents, it requires you to do additional steps, which are the same steps you did with the project this past year. Hold your 2 hearings, you wait your 30 days. If no one files a petition against it, it's your approval to move forward. So if the district's rate starts to move above the 40 cents and we look at another project for the district down the road, you may just have to go through that process. Depending on the amount of those bonds, you may have had to go through it anyways. So it doesn't necessarily change what the district would have done. It's just, I bring that up because you're going to start to hear those thrown out there maybe as you go around with school board meetings and pieces. If you're above the 70 cents, it's a really different world. You have some flexibility. And again, it doesn't come in play until another 4 years. And so there's some time to even potentially manage that and stay under that if needed. So you have flexibility that other districts don't, is really the bottom line when you look at this piece when it comes to the debt. As we continue moving forward, let's talk now a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of levy impacts. So this is your operations fund. And again, the dotted lines are what we would have seen pre-Senate Enrolled Act 1, which is a normal growth of our operations fund at about 4% annually. And then the solid line is what it looks like for you. And this is a real nuanced piece. The first 2 years, I mean, it doesn't look a whole lot different for 26 and then to 27. And then we see this drop from 27 to 28. That's because there's this little known thing called local income tax that's collected at the county level that funds what we refer to as a property tax replacement credit. Lowers people's property tax bills. Been in place for years. Current legislation, it goes away. And so when it goes away, it has impact on your revenue to the tune of about $100,000. So it's a little nuanced piece that was a part of this legislation. I'd say the graph probably makes it look a little bit worse than what it is because, again, it's around $100,000. I mean, that's still impact, obviously, and it's dollars you're not going to collect. So that's one of the nuances that's happening in terms of the revenue from the legislation. The next piece is your referendum. Because, again, if I go back to that math problem, AV times rate gives me revenue. If my AV goes down, my revenue is going to go down. So the 52 cents that we currently have approved, if stayed in place, would generate fewer dollars in future years. And that's what's really shown in that solid line, is the revenue it's generating would go down. Again, this is a place where there is some flexibility to consider that most districts don't have, is you've not approved and taken your full rate. You've managed that based on your need, right? Many districts, that 52 cents would be their max rate, and they are facing a situation where it's only declining revenue. Theoretically, you could tap into some of that additional rate to help with the revenue if the district chose. There's a whole new set of referendum rules and games that we're kind of facing now. We have districts, we're working with 4 districts currently that are going for referendum renewals this fall. They are looking to have to increase their referendum rate anywhere from 10 to 15 cents in order to generate the same amount of revenue they've been generating in the past. Because again, we're in this declining AV situation. So that's a really hard selling point. Hey, we've had a 25-cent referendum. We need you to renew it at 40 cents. Yet it doesn't mean any additional impact on the taxpayer. That's the hard messaging piece with this. We've often said there's as much about the messaging as there is the financial piece, because this is so confusing, it's complicated, and now it's going to start to move in an entirely new way. And so again, just something the district has to consider, because if you kept the 52 cents, it's going to generate fewer dollars. Big picture on this chart, what this data really is showing is this is that 10% liability credit, and these are real dollars that the district will not collect in terms of revenue in both the operations fund and the debt service fund because of that 10% credit. So again, we've had some revenue impact that's happening here that we have to model and pay attention to, really over the next 6 to 8 years because this legislation's in place. And so it's another pullback on revenue that we're seeing for all districts. Again, relatively small in the grand scheme of things. As we look and compare across districts, this is, I think, the theme for all of you. We've been running this for about 70 school districts right now across the state. So we've been looking at a lot of this data. You probably have the most flexibility, and while you have impact, it's probably on the smaller end, and you have some tools that other districts don't have. There are some districts that are going to be in some very difficult situations, and you're going to hear districts that have never talked about referendums talk about referendums, and you're going to see a lot more referendums come on the ballot because of all of these impacts. You have some flexibility that a lot of districts don't. Now, does it mean you don't have impact? No, that doesn't mean that you don't have impact, and that's what this slide really shows, right, is there is the potential for declining revenue if you keep your referendum rate where it's at, and the impact on the operations fund, there are fewer dollars that are going to be coming to the table. So one, revenue is flat, let's call it, and yet what we know what happens to expenses, costs are going to go up, utilities are going to go up, insurance is going to go up, salary increases that are going to be needed. So expenses rise and your revenue's staying flat. That is the thing that districts are facing across the state, is really this constrained environment of fewer dollars available, yet still having growing expenses, and how do you navigate that really moving forward, I think, is the challenge for a lot of districts. The last piece here, a couple of slides, is really then to look at the taxpayer impact. So what's happening with taxpayers and the liability, and did this legislation do maybe what it was intended, if that, depending on the intentions? So this is really our tax base here. All the homesteads are at the cap, really, as we've talked. It's the median home value. And what you see happen with their actual tax bill in 2026 is it does go down, right? It goes down slightly, a couple $100. Why is that? They're getting that 10% tax credit. And so it's going to drive the bill down, their tax bill down. But then you can see in future years, as gross assessed value continues to grow, so does their tax liability, which is really similar to what we've dealt with the last 4 or 5 years, which spurred a lot of this pushback and conversation around for property taxes, right, and property tax relief, and them trying to limit that. Legislation didn't really do that at the end of the day. There's still going to be growing liability as assessed value of homes go up. The last slide there within this is really, it says tax burden shift. It's asking the question about who's paying the taxes, where's the revenue coming from for taxes, and we've been looking at it from this lens. Currently, 27% or 27 of every $100 comes from homeowners. Well, when this legislation that was supposed to create property tax relief is fully in effect, 27% still comes from homeowners. And what we're actually seeing in a lot of districts is the 27% for homeowners is becoming 32% for homeowners. And that's still a risk here because, as I alluded to, as the business personal property starts to decline over these next several years, the other pieces of the pie get bigger. So the winner, so to speak, is any business that has large business personal property, because their bills could go down, where everyone else's is having to make some of that up. We say all of that because it causes us caution to think that they're not done, or they might not come back with some future tweaks when it comes to this legislation, because we don't know that it's really doing what they campaigned on. And if you go back to the last slide there, or previous slide, 2028, we have 2 years of rising tax bills, and we're going to walk into a gubernatorial election with the governor running on for re-election who campaigned on property tax relief. They're going to know this data going into that. So what do they do to try as a party to push back or curtail that? I think those are some of the long-range questions we're asking. The last thing I think in summary, I've kind of hinted at, right? There is some impact, right? All schools are facing impact when it comes to revenues. I think you have rising tax rates, which are not going to make sense, right? You're right, the tax rate's going up. That must mean you're charging us more, you're getting more money, and that's not necessarily the case. So there's the messaging and understanding around that. There's the navigation around some constrained revenues, where we're going to have the expenses increasing kind of moving forward. But I think at the end of the day, like I've alluded to, The district doesn't have some of the challenges around the debt service and potential new projects that a lot of districts are facing currently. You have some levers to pull that not every district has, and the impacts at the end of the day, I'd say, are to a much greater extent with a lot of districts that we're facing. So while it's not great news, I said I've been auditioning for a job with hospice because all I do is go around and give bad news every day. And this is some of the better news I've been able to give, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we have districts losing $2 million in a year, and they're having to figure that out on a whim, right, and very quickly. So this is definitely a much more what I would call manageable situation as a district that can be navigated, with Dr. Trebley kind of moving forward, that a lot of districts aren't as fortunate with, I would say, at the end of the day. So I know that's a lot. It's very nuanced pieces. More than happy to take any questions.
Are there any?
Barry, that was a whole bunch of bad news. Thank you. But we've been hearing about, this isn't new. This is something we've heard about, and this is something they campaigned on, and we get this. With multiple slides over and over of like, then there's this nuance, then there's this, then there's this. There is a piece that we are a TIF district here in Speedway also. And can you talk about maybe that or other districts that I've heard that, the TIF district eventually runs out, and that will transform or move that back to the other property rate or assessed value?
Yeah, so the concern with TIF districts is, like Speedway, many of them often have a large portion of business personal property associated with them. And so if that were to start to go away, what's that potential impact? There's also some concern that they're often backed by local income tax dollars, and those pieces of legislation go away. One of the nuances with the TIF district or the local income tax moving forward, they've established a whole new kind of set of parameters for local municipalities, schools are not included, to establish new local income tax sources of revenue beginning in 2028. You could use those typically to back bonds. The problem is now you actually have to approve those on an annual basis, those new revenue sources. And that's not a great way to go out and issue debt, is to say year to year, I got to see if I have the money to pay for it. They've put in language that no one really knows the impact. They knew tax rates were going to go up, right? And if you remember our conversation from last February, when we looked at our raise here in the district of that debt service rate, it was going to generate additional TIF dollars. And we talked a little bit about that with the town. They knew that this mechanism was going to cause that again, so they've created some new language around TIF neutralizations that still have a lot of work. So as much as I'd love to answer your question around TIFs, there's still a lot of questions, and that's why I think they're going to continue to come back with some of this legislation at the end of the day.
But the TIF districts eventually will fall off, which will increase the assessed value of outside of the TIF district.
Correct. And
There's some like in the airports or whatnot. I know there's some places are big winners when that happens.
correct. You see that in your debt service fund, not in your referendum fund, because the referendum already has access to the
That's
TIF
right.
piece.
Yep.
So it just depends on where you're at with those. But it's always a benefit because you get more assessed value into your localized funds.
And as we've discussed before, Barry, that we're very conservative. We have been over the years. I mean, even Mr. Holt before me, that we only go 52 cents out of 59 that's been voted on 3 times. And so I'm very proud of where we're at, but I do know this isn't something we're just going to turn the page. We're going to have to do some things and comprehensive throughout the corporation over the next 6 years to make sure that we can still provide small classrooms with great teachers. And I don't think there's anybody around me that doesn't want that. So our results have been extraordinary, and Policy Analytics is a great partner of ours along with Stiefel, and I think we have a good plan ahead. So thank you for your time there.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Are there
you.
any other questions or comments? We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our fourth agenda item this evening is an update on iRead results.
Well,
My news is much better than Mr. Gardner's news. Our iRead scores are going in the right direction. They're not done yet. So if we took a snapshot as of today, about 70% of our second graders have already passed the third grade standard for reading. 70% of our second graders, if we did that today. 93% of our third graders would have passed the third grade assessment if we took the snapshot today. What makes it even better is we're not done. We still have a couple days, 3 days left in summer school. We'll be given the iRead assessment. Remember that it changed this year, so second graders take the test, and if they did not pass the test, then they can take it one more time. And some of our schools gave it a test at the end of the school year. Some of our schools are remediating during summer school and are going to be testing these next couple of days. So those scores will go up. The ones I just quoted you will go up. Third graders have 3 chances, so they could take it in. First of all, they could have passed it last year as second graders. They could have taken it again in March as a third grader. They could take it at the end of the year as a third grader, and they could take it during summer school. And we have students that will be taking the test starting tomorrow and Thursday, and those numbers will go up. In July, we'll have all that results, and we'll give you a more finalized results of where we're at with iRead. But it is trending in a great direction. Remember the statistics I gave you last board meeting that we've narrowed this down to individual students, and some of these students moved in a week before the test. Some of them moved into the country in January and February, and we're trying to get them to read and pass in English. So we can narrow it down to what is our instructional techniques, and are they working? And I think overwhelmingly the answer to that is yes. And we're seeing what better way to test them. Some are, like I said, some are testing at the end of the school year, and some are waiting till the end of summer school to do that. So we'll have a final on the iRead in July, because it will be done at that point. And then in August and September, August or September, we cannot release public scores with iLearn until July 28th. So it will take us a little bit to put it together. We can get it done in time. We'll have it ready for the August board meeting, if not the September board meeting, along with SAT scores. But our test scores are trending in the right direction. Our teachers and our principals, our instructional coaches, they're moving our kids in the right direction. So much better news than Mr. Gardner just gave us.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions about that?
No.
All right, so the 5th agenda item this evening is to approve WCJS amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. The recommendation, this is an action item, the recommendation is to approve the amendment to the West Central Joint Service Special Education Cooperation Fund operating cost allocation. Since 2014, Speedway Schools has partnered with MSD Wayne Township along with a few other schools, allowing us to place students at Sanders. And that's what this routine matter. Typically, every year we come to you for this. The cost per student is $50,000 on average. We have about 2 students per year who attend, typically due to students moving in our district with special needs and that we're unable to meet within our own school. We are also partnered with the DHH and the Thrive program, which is $31,000. This is in MOUs in your packets. Again, this is a routine. We've used these. As of right now, we have 0 students at Sanders. But my first year, 2018-19, we had 6. So it does go up and down, but right now we've been at 0 for the last, at least the last year. So my recommendation is approve these amendments.
I'll move, I'll move that we approve the WCJS amendments, West Central Joint Services.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion or questions concerning the memorandum of understanding between MSD, Wayne Township, and School Town of Speedway on these. All those in favor of approval of this memorandum of understanding, please signify. That passes unanimously.
I just
You're
signed
empowered to
this.
sign
I'm
it.
empowered, yeah.
The sixth agenda item this evening is to approve amendment number 2 to the Food Services Management Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is, again, a routine matter. We use Airmark food service providers, and we have for many, many years, but this is the amendment to that we're required to do through the state of Indiana. The recommendation is to approve the food service management agreement. Again, Airmark with our cafeteria supervisor, Ryan Hahn, has done an extraordinary job. The adjusted fees are small and presented over the life of the contract like each year. Enclosed is the agreement, and again, the recommendation is to approve this.
Mr. President, go ahead.
I propose we approve the amendment number 2 to the Food Services Management Agreement.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion or questions concerning the amendment number 2 for our Food Services Management Agreement? Hearing, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the amendment, please signify. That passes 5-0. The seventh agenda item this evening is to approve the institutional memberships.
The recommendation is to continue annual institutional membership in the CIESC Consortium of School Networking, Greater Speedway Area Chamber of Commerce, Indiana Association of College Admissions Counseling, Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents, Indiana Association of School Business Officials, Indiana Cooperative Library Service Authority, Indiana National School Boards Association, Indiana Urban Schools Association, Indiana Association of Small Rural Schools, South Central Study Council, and the Alliance for Marion County Children. Once again, most all of these groups have lobbyists that try to protect our school along with rural school or urban school, small school, very beneficial. I'm a part of a lot of these, and some of these I think I'm the president of Chamber of Commerce, so that's which is great. But anyway, my recommendation to approve these memberships.
I move to approve the institutional memberships.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion or questions concerning the institutional memberships? Would all those in favor of approval of the institutional memberships, please signify. Passes 5-0. The eighth agenda item this evening is to approve the 2025-2026 employment contracts for administrators, homeschool advisors, graduation coach, and nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please mark out 2425 in your notes. That should be 2526. The recommendation is to approve these annual salaries. We come to you a few times a year. Remember, the other times in December for a group of administrators that have been here long enough. That is, we run them January 1st through December 31st. This group of people go in from the school year, which is off, from July 1st to June 30th. So that's why this happens this way. Over time, things have just moved to that direction on this. But the recommendation approve the following: our school nurse, we'll consider that as a corporation nurse, our homeschool advisor, Lauren Doyle, homeschool advisor, Mary Dawn McGuire, homeschool advisor, Emily Salmon, homeschool advisor, Deborah June. Also, graduation coach Tyra Borum, high school assistant principal Gary Carter, director of special education Libby Dunbar, newbie principal Heather Gorgas, assistant superintendent Lance Schnaus. We've already approved this group of people, minus the nurse, the school corporation nurse, which we'll do later, and that's why we just said the name of that position. But these already have been approved in the recommendation of the personnel report. This just certifies their contract so Nancy can move forward on it.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the 25-26 employment contracts for the named administrators, homeschool advisors, graduation coach, and nurse to be named.
Thank you very much.
Second.
It's seconded. Is there any discussion or questions concerning the 2025-26 employment contracts? All those in favor of approval of these contracts, please signify. That passes unanimously, 5-0. The ninth agenda item this evening is to present the budget development calendar for the 2026 budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is just a presentation, like, look what's coming up, and that's a capital asset plan, like always, will be in July. We'll present the general budget parameters to the board in the July meeting also, which is July 8th. At that time, we go through different things on posting that on the school website and Gateway. This is a negotiation year, so we'll have to go through other steps as we go through. That's due in September and October. Then eventually, we will do the budget presentation to the town council when they'll call upon us to do that. And finally, September 1st, the last day to notify all budget forms have been completed. Again, this is just courtesy to let you know these things are coming, and it's in our board agenda at this time. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. The 10th agenda item is to acknowledge the receipt of $286,141.23 in grants. The 11th agenda item is the personnel report.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have several items on the personnel report for this month. We have one retirement, and that is Tim Kurtz, who announced his retirement at the, June 1st from a science teacher and head track coach at Speedway High School. We have 10 resignations. Whitney Mashaki is a teacher at Speedway Junior High, and she's been on FMLA leave, and that lasts for a year, and she has finalized that FMLA leave and resigned her position. Amy Mole is a band choir teacher at Speedway High School. Corinne Owens is a 7th grade volleyball coach at Speedway Junior High School. Tina Murley has resigned her position as 8th grade volleyball coach at Speedway Junior High School, assistant track coach at Speedway High School. Sam Aarons is assistant football coach at Speedway High School. Todd Jarrett is assistant volleyball coach at Speedway High School. Whitney Baker is the girls' head tennis coach at Speedway High School. Devin Nance is the 8th grade boys basketball coach at Speedway Junior High School. Joseph Davis is the assistant girls soccer coach at Speedway High School. And Marcus McCormick's position as equipment manager at Speedway Junior High School. Under employment, we have 14 people that we're going to ask you to approve for employment at the end of this. Heidi Ritter is being recommended as our corporation school nurse. Craig Morrison is a strength and conditioning teacher at Speedway High School. Also an ECA stipend that is on the ECA list that at the back of your packet for weight room for fall, winter, and spring, which is what we've done with the previous strength and conditioning coach. Mackenzie Riddle is a custodian. Mike McCormick is a head wrestling coach at Speedway Junior High School. Derek Eads is a head girls golf coach at Speedway Junior High School. Brian Williams is the 8th grade assistant football coach at Speedway Junior High School. Randy Saxton is the 8th grade boys basketball coach at Speedway Junior High School. Taylor Ridge, volleyball assistant coach at Speedway High School. J.D. Clampett is the boys assistant basketball coach at Speedway High School. Tajar Henderson is the boys assistant basketball coach at Speedway High School. Shaquille J.Z. is the assistant football coach at Speedway High School. And that will be a split stipend with David Farrell, and he is being recommended as assistant football coach at Speedway High School. Sean Mentert, girls assistant golf coach at Speedway High School, and Ricky Killian is the equipment manager at Speedway Junior High School. If you'll notice on your extra duty report that comes each month, this is where we list our coaches, club sponsors, department chairs, extra stipends. Important to note that if the employee is new to our corporation, I've given you their application packet and they're in green. But if they're new to a position, they're in blue. And this is typical of this time of year when we start having a lot of movement with coaches. With that, I ask that you approve the personnel report as presented.
I'll move that we approve the personnel report as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or any questions concerning the personnel report?
Thanks for all the work. That's a lot of coming and going, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we're going to look back on this time and think that, I think we're heading in the right direction. I really do. I think there's a lot of really important hires on this list and excited about them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Would all those in favor of approving the personnel report as presented, please signify. The personnel report passes 5-0. The 12th agenda item this evening is a supplemental personnel report.
On the supplemental personnel report, I would ask that you approve Eric Holtzclaw as the custodian. He's going to be placed at Newby Elementary.
I move that we approve the supplemental personnel report as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions concerning the supplemental personnel report? All those in favor of approving the supplemental personnel report as presented? That passes 5-0. The 13th agenda item is the recognition of visitors or other business. Is there any other business?
Not at this time.
All right. The 14th agenda item is to adjourn ourselves and to approve claims. Thank you all very much.